Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the spread or distribution of science and engineering degrees across the planet, across the world. And countries that have the highest concentration of science and engineering degrees also happen to be the wealthiest countries. Those who have the least concentration of science and engineering degrees happen to be the poorest countries. Now, that's hardly a shock, I think, to anybody looking at this, but it's a little bit more nuanced than just having a few more degree holders than the next place along the line. The difference in wealth is huge. If you look at the wealthiest countries, and you start to see, by the time you get sort of below the 20th sort of wealthiest, this is per capita wealth, wealthiest countries, then you start to see the gaps become wider and wider. So by the time you get to the hundredth, and you're talking about, or the halfway mark even, you're talking about a chasm of difference in wealth between those in the top 20 and those, say, between 90 and 100 in the rankings. So those in the top 20 and those, say, between 90 and 100 in the rankings. So it's certainly relevant. Now, I guess what's more interesting still, I think, is how the sort of gender studies, sociology, feminist, equal outcome, equity type brigade, how they think the problem can be addressed, because there are different outcomes. So different outcomes mean there's a social problem that has to be fixed. So how do you fix it? Well, the way you fix it is you just give everyone a science and engineering degree. That's how you fix it. Wait, hold on a minute. Well, how will that fix anything? These people have no science or engineering education or any demonstrable competence or any independent, impartial assessment or capability through, say, exams and this sort of thing, merit-based exams. There's no merit at all in that. Well, who cares? Who cares is the equity brigade answer. Who gives a shit? The issue is that everyone has a science and engineering degree, and that will somehow magic dust. That will magically make all countries equal, all parts of the world equal. So now this was an interesting thing in say, the Soviet Union or the communist countries, where they identified that being an engineer, that they identified that the West had nearly all the engineers. In the early days of the Soviet Union, when they were trying to set up all their factories, they found that they really had to import Western engineers to do almost everything. A tiny proportion of the people people in the Soviet Union were engineering competent, but they didn't like this from an ideological point of view. Although they still used the the Western technology to a point. They wanted to create their own engineers, so they just reclassified jobs. So someone that fixed, repaired worn-out shoes, for example, they'd classify them as a shoe engineer, or someone who painted the walls of your house. I mean, that would be a decorating engineer. So they created all these crazy categories of engineering. So they'd say, well, look, last year we only had 1,000 engineers in the country, but look now, and just 12 months later, we've got 1 million engineers. I mean, wow, look out! And this is very much a sort of an equity outcome measurement type concept that you can see today in say the universities and so on in the West. They're very much based on this equity thing. How can we have more black lesbians holding degrees? Well, we'll just award them affirmative action degrees. Problem solved. Bingo, done. And so we still see that attitude around today, and it's very sort of communist, Marxist. Now, the idea. I was talking to some people. This is a while ago now. I was talking to some people about this affirmative action thing and saying, well, why don't we all put more resources, like as in the education system, put more resources to helping black lesbians achieve an equal outcome on a merit basis, an equal outcome with straight white males, for example, who get these engineering degrees. And I was howled down and laughed at and jeered at and so on the basis that if you're going to achieve equity, you kind of got to break the rules. One of the first things you have to do to achieve equity is get rid of merit. Any benefit or natural capacity that, in this case, straight white males have, you have to take that away in order to produce the equity. So you gift affirmative action degrees to black lesbians and PhDs and everything, masters, whatever, and that creates the equality. So that they both hold the same bit of paper is the equality, not that they both achieve the same merit-based independent standard. And they just refuse to accept that holding the bit of paper, there is the equality, there is the equity, there is the, and so they very much have this view, and that they think, well, third world country, in Africa or somewhere, we'll just give them all affirmative action science degrees, problem solved. And you see this in the legal profession today. We don't have enough black lesbians in, as judges or lawyers or prosecutors, and go, hey, just give them all an affirmative action degree and then give them an affirmative action job or position. Again, problem solved. So that's how much, and they see it very much that way. Now, it's of course far more nuanced, and the reality is that technically advanced economies need certain skills, and they go to develop those skills. So those skills include, for example, science and engineering. And the more advanced the economy, and this could be coding, computer software, or say medical science or engineering, building bridges and whatever. So there's a whole range, and the more advanced your economy is, and the more sophisticated your infrastructure is, the more skills you'll need in that area. So it's hardly surprising that there are more engineers for in an advanced technical economy than there are in a third world mud hut economy. Obviously, there's going to be a difference there. And even if there were engineers in that economy, they're not needed. There'd be no jobs for them. So they would move as a result to the advanced economies. But because in those countries they don't need engineers, or certainly nowhere near to the extent they do in other economies, then the educational system isn't geared to generating or producing engineers. And because an engineering degree in those countries is a nice, easy passport to a first world country, then the wealthier families, or anyone who can afford it, bribes the fuck out of the corrupt tin pot bullshit university lecturers in those places to give them a degree, so they then can migrate to a first world country and pretend, continue the endless pretending there. Now, I've personally been involved in the engine, like civil and electrical mechanical engineering type side of things, and have either had to interview or been on panels interviewing candidates for engineering jobs, including sort of beginner jobs, like entry level engineering, trainee, you'd almost call it, jobs. So I've been involved in that, and I can say firsthand that the affirmative action problem in the West is huge. Every straight white male that was interviewed really knew his stuff. He passed and got the degree on a meritorious basis, and they knew that. And you could give them pretty much any problem to calculate. Just cubic meters of an excavation, which is at the simple end, and other stuff. And a lot of them could just do it in their heads. Just that answers this, and all of them looked and sounded and behaved like they were qualified and had achieved to a high level of rigor and merit. Now, alternatively, the minority groups, that came in for the job, the classic, the black lesbian, I was a white lesbian. They were very much, they obviously had got their degree under a much lower level of rigor. They didn't know the answers to the questions, even assumed that the questions were designed to trip them up because they were racist, patriarchy, capitalist evilness, and all that stuff. So they're very touchy, very chip on shoulder, and clearly they hadn't got the degree on any form of merit. And again, I don't think some of them, just thinking back there, they couldn't perform a single calculation that all the white boys could. But it goes on, and people who have been hired with an affirmative action engineering degree, of which there are now many, in the West. They are incapable of doing the work that the straight white boy is. And then you get this, absurd situations where big multinational firms, especially ones that are dependent on government contracts, they love making announcements that, our first black lesbian chief engineer, and this, they love doing that sort of stuff. But this person actually doesn't do anything. They're just there to be photographed and to be available for press releases to demonstrate work credentials. And they're not there to actually do any engineering, nor would you want them to, for fuck's sake. You wouldn't want to drive across a bridge or drive on a road or work in a building that was built or engineered or designed by any of them. They couldn't do squat because they've all got affirmative action degrees purely on the basis of being the proverbial black lesbian. So this is, but I hadn't realised just how closely the preponderance of again science and engineering degrees, how that preponderance ties in so closely with per capita wealth. When I think about it, it probably isn't a surprise, but it's something I hadn't thought that it was that closely aligned. For example, in some of the Arabic countries, they're very heavily dependent on their huge oil reserves, and they've got relatively small populations relative to the amount of oil that they're exporting. But if you look at nearly their entire engineering infrastructure, it's nearly all Western engineers that are working there, and Western firms providing that sort of technical expertise, not just at engineering level, but at supervisor and foreman and leading hand type level as well. But that's it. But it illustrates too the extent to which the West is destroying itself there, because part of the equity program in the West now is to say, well, engineering and science degrees are prestigious. They confer prestige and esteem and so on upon the holder of the degree. So why don't we help and assist and work hard to make sure more black lesbians get these degrees? No, of course not. The path to equality and equity is affirmative action. We gift them these degrees. We just gift them, and that creates the equity, which is really where we're at now. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.